Backyard recruiting has revitalized the high school recruiting for DeShaun Foster. It's done wonders for the class of 25 that's committed to UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast. It's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. This episode is brought to you by a new mobile game, Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Brand new. It's completely free. No ads and 100% playable offline. Use the code Locked On CFB, Locked On College Football, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. Where we start today, though, is the coaching legacy that is about to begin in the tenure of DeShaun Foster. As we count down the days to the Hawaii game, as Hawaii tries their best to play their first game in Week 0 against Delaware State, the Bruins are still more than a week away as they get their final roster, their depth chart, all settled to a close as fall camp gets ready and Week 1 comes to a start. What for UCLA, it's not just this year they're trying to build, right? It's how do they continue to build for the future with the class of 25, the class of 26, and most recently, August 21st, UCLA got a early evening, late evening commitment from none other than Juju Walls, which continues the trend for DeShaun Foster, backyard recruiting, right? You saw the backyard sports, they're going to start their backyard sports gaming and shows, right? They came back. Well, what DeShaun Foster's done, backyard sports, backyard recruiting, going to California kids and recruiting them, which is not what happened with Chip Kelly consistently enough. And while Kelly did find ways to steal great talent, some California kids from the portal, it was UCLA now emphasizing with what DeShaun Foster has implemented with the new staff, more ability for the staff to go out and recruit. It's not limited to certain guys. New NCAA regulations, which all, as DeShaun Foster has said on some of his media interviews and his media availability, it's turned into negotiations. And while he hasn't had to, as a head coach, find ways to change his old ways, what he's doing is finding ways to get the local kids to come to UCLA. Okay, whether it's the LA, local, greater SoCal, greater Los Angeles area kids, maybe they're steeping and going into Orange County, or in this case, they're going with Juju Walls, an edge in the class of 25, who comes in as a possible dual threat guy, right? Linebacker, defensive edge rusher, somebody who comes in, another Pittsburgh, California kid for UCLA, who you will see in Southern California high school games this year because Pittsburgh will play down in SoCal. I think might be one of those linear games of the week for the CIF Southern section. So stay tuned. You'll see him and other UCLA commits, which brings this UCLA commitment list, adding on to the Jaden Hudsons, the Carson Coxes, led by the big name of Matt Iamaleava. And then you've got the likes of Weston Port, Chase Coleman, Gamino, and the list goes on for this class that I think has now grown to 17 in terms of scholarship offers, 19 if you include the kicker and the punter they got last week. So UCLA got an Aussie Rolls punter, they got a kicker, 2 preferred walk-ons in a day and age where the scholarship limits are extending to the full roster limit size. So I wonder how the preferred walk-on is going to work based on special teams. That's not a conversation for now. What UCLA continues to do is grow their overall rank, according to 24/7 Sports, to 35 in the country, where they're teetering. If they can close in on some later 2025 commits, we're not going to talk necessarily about specific guys, but they could close in on an even bigger 25 class. That ranking can push top 30 and maybe being outside of a top 25 class, which I initially thought they could push. UCLA has backed off, but they can still go get some top tier commits led by the Iamaleavas, led by another Pittsburgh kid in Jaden Hudson. Teammates, right? Local kid with the likes of Juju Walls comes in, like the way how UCLA was recruiting him as both a linebacker and defensive edge rusher. This is what he said to the Rivals Bruin Blitz affiliates specifically, and he was just excited to go to UCLA. The staff stuck strong with him after attending the prospect camp. Always important. 17th scholarship commitment for the Bruins, and he's a high school teammate with his defensive safety in Jaden Hudson. So you got a teammate. You got UCLA, who's got a quarterback-receiver combo, and then you've got DeShaun Foster and his team going after guys that are defensive teammates currently going to the class of 25 that might, all right, you bring 2 kids from this school, you bring 2 kids from that school. All of a sudden, you try to get and hone in on one school and they got talent. You slowly spread your roots throughout the area, whether it's NorCal, whether it's SoCal, maybe it's the Central Coast, maybe it's the Central Valley. You go through all of California and you can compile a team that can compete with anybody in the Big Ten. It can compete across the country with the big boys, with the skill positions, the quarterbacks, the defenders. Heck, you can find coaches all around. UCLA does not necessarily need to leave their own state to recruit anybody. But with the extension of going into the Big Ten, they can go like they were in this class of 24 into the new days and age of going and get a Jameer Benjamin, guys who are committed to 2 Big Ten schools and coming to UCLA. You can go get tight ends who might go to UCLA, then flip right. You can go into Big Ten country and get their best players. And now with the overall expansion from West Coast to East Coast, UCLA can recruit all over. But what's worked so far for UCLA, growing in their high school recruiting, has been hitting the backyard so much. All right. You talk about 2 kids going to the same high school. That's 2 California kids, right? In Pittsburgh. You got Manny Meleava and his high school teammate Brown, wide receiver, right? Coming to UCLA, high school teammates. That's easy ways to get 1 to 2 commitments from talented kids that you're not going to get every kid as a 5-star. That's ridiculous. That's ludicrous. And at the moment, UCLA is not pulling in 10, 25. They're not pulling in a bazillion 5-stars. But it's the development that is crucial for this coaching staff to do. It's buying low and finding guys that reach their peaks of their amateur, slowly less of an amateur, student-athlete career during their UCLA days, sophomore, junior year. And what I was reading on the 24/7 sports site about the commitment about Juju Walls, this isn't necessarily a guy as a 3-star that's going to come right away and compete in 2025 for a starting spot. Not every guy in the playing field of any sport is ready to truly compete as a true freshman. So what has been said on the scouting report for this kid, according to the 24/7 sports site, maybe not somebody who's going to compete right away, the 3rd edge rusher to come and commit to UCLA, and will likely redshirt potentially in his first year, according to Brandon Huffman. And another thing, what Greg Biggins said, another recruiting analyst, all right, from 24/7 Sports, he's a natural pass rusher. He's got 20 sacks, 213 tackles, 6'2 and a half, and over 200 pounds. The hybrid outside linebacker, edge rusher, and depends based on his strength, depends on his speed, where the explosion can happen, where he'll play. If he's lighter, probably a linebacker. If he picks up some weight, will play be more of as an edge and can be that hybrid guy that seems like defenses are looking to employ, that hybrid edge, right? We saw Latu. Linebacker came off the edge, boom, boom, boom. Might see that as Oladipo. Might see that as Medrano this year in different roles, trying to spice things up and get some pressure on the quarterback this year with the deep linebacker room, looking to grow its pass rush this year after all the talent that left this year. So UCLA is hitting what they're weak at this year to make sure they've got depth for years to come. And it might not turn into immediate talent in 25, right? UCLA is not competing for a national championship necessarily in 24 or 25, but they're trying to put in the ability to get some depth. Now you can get some extra scholarships with the scholarship limits or the scholarships increasing in football, although that means a lot for other sports. And UCLA is going after kids in their own, in literally the state of California. That's all you had to do. That's all Chip had to do. And he could have fielded total, complete competitive teams just by getting a Juju Walls and a Jaden Hudson, 2 teammates. All right. Not that they're going to completely make this whole team work. There's 17 total commits. But now UCLA in the top 40, trying to crack the top 30 again. And they're trending on the right way. If they can get some commitments at the end of the class of 25 recruiting cycle, once that happens near the end of the season and hit the portal, UCLA can be on the ground running based on what they show on the product on the field in 2024 to make them a competitive team for years to come, right? It all ties in. to how you look, how you bring the hype, the energy, and just flat out trying to recruit your own kids in the state of California. That was lacking. And UCLA's completely turned the tide on that right now. All right. Now let's talk about Ethan Garbers, right? A kid, local kid, went elsewhere, came to UCLA after transferring, waited so long to get a true starting opportunity like this, where he's the unquestioned starter, unlike in 23, where he had to rip it back from Dante Moore. Garbers, where does he stand amongst the pro football focused quarterback rankings across the country, especially West Coast quarterbacks? Where does he look? Where does he look in the Big Ten? We expect big things. What does the nation think of him? Next on Locked On UCLA. Are you trying to take that end of summer dream vacation, but you're dreading the cost? Well, with Ibotta, you can get cash back on all of your purchases, so you can spend more time making memories to finish off the summer and less time dreaming about them. All right? Because Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, groceries, beauty supplies, toys for the kiddos, so you can make sure you're beating inflation on no matter what you're purchasing. It's time you joined an app that's got over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Brands like Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more, over 1,000 retailers and 2,400 brands. Ibotta is offering $5 just to try the code Locked On College when you register. Go to the App Store, Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app, and use the code Locked On College to start earning cash back. That's IBOTTA, Ibotta, in the Google Play Store or App Store, and use the code Locked On College. All right, second segment. Let's talk about starting quarterback Ethan Garbers, who has been QB1 since he's taken away the job from Dante Moore, had to battle injuries. One of his goals is to play every game this year, which is good, and also maybe a sign to keeping this man upright can help lead to a lot of things. UCLA is not necessarily tied to the 6X of the quarterback, but they will be a lot better when Garbers is on the field as he can be the game manager, he can make some plays, can maybe check some things depending on the leash given to him by Eric Bieniemy. This is a guy who, if he's on the field, UCLA will be a different team, just like they were last year. Every time Garbers was able to finish a game when he started, or in the case of the LA Bowl game, when he finished a game, they were undefeated in 23. All right, they finished. He got hurt and got taken out of the Arizona game. Yes, he started at Arizona that game, but every game that he was able to complete, UCLA was led to victory. Okay, so this is a guy that, unquestioned leader, has had to take and digest a lot of new information, new offensive installs as a senior, growing with a very big time receiver group, a lot of talent returning in the running back room. If they can just keep him upright, then he doesn't have to worry about blitzes or pressure, which hurt UCLA quarterbacks in 23, all three of them. All three of them were a little hurt and banged up and beat up because UCLA couldn't protect him. But we're not talking no lines. We're talking UCLA's quarterback, who, let's talk about what he was rated by Pro Football Focus, who did a whole exercise about what is each team's most likely starter, what are they projected to be across the country in terms of not necessarily NFL draft projection, but what they will do in terms of the 2024 collegiate season. A lot of love's given at the top to the Carson Becks from Georgia, Dylan Gabriel, Shadir Sanders, former conference rival from Colorado, even Quinn Ewers. And then you got to go a little bit further down for UCLA's quarterback. All right, you see Drew Aller from Penn State getting some love in the 13th spot overall. Even Wisconsin's Tyler Van Dyke, who will come, they won't come this year. UCLA's not playing Wisconsin. And then you got to keep going a little bit. Remember, DJ, he's out at Florida State now. He's top 17. Grayson McCall went to NC State after all those years at Coastal Carolina. Cam Rising, former foe, is 19th. And then Miller Moss, all right, 23, Nico Iamaleava, UCLA commit, Madden's older brother at Tennessee, top 25 quarterback in the country. So as much as you want to think, where's UCLA? All right, Will Rogers, Washington's starting quarterback, listed as number 30. You got to go all the way some might say this is a slap in the face to Ethan Garbers. Some might not. Behind the Cal starting quarterback like Fernando Mendoza, behind Ashton Daniels from Stanford, it is the likes of Garbers, who is slotted as the 51st quarterback on this list compiled by Pro Football Focus. One of the players, several players, as they wrote, talking about who started at UCLA, remains. All right, this is a guy who had a 93.5 passing grade, and he's not exactly, the flashiest guy, which is why he's here in the 51st spot. But before we get too crazy, remember, he's ahead of the Michigan State starter, Aiden Childs, who came from Oregon State, very talented, did not get a lot of playing time, but Jonathan Smith brought him to East Lansing. Ahead of Dylan Raiola, the true freshman starter, one of the highest rated recruits and quarterbacks to start as a true freshman, I believe, in recent, if not a lot of Nebraska's history. But we're not here talking about Nebraska, other than the fact that the Bruins are going to see him later this year, and he is ahead of Garbers of Nebraska's starting quarterback. Max Brosmer, and Cade McNamara, right? Those are a few teams that UCLA plays on this year's schedule. The Minnesota quarterback, the Nebraska true freshman quarterback, and also the Iowa quarterback, Cade McNamara. As much as I want to say, how do we say Miller Moss is that much better? How do we say that all these guys are better than, Will Rogers? He put up numbers at Mississippi State, but will he do so under a Jed Fish offense? We'll find out. UCLA, sitting there, all right, Max Johnson, who has battled career at Texas A&M and to North Carolina. All right, this is a Garbers kid who has been battle-tested, and quite frankly, you see him, he's closer to the middle than he is exactly the top, but that's why there's some optimism. The quarterback play is expected to be better than the Minnesota starting quarterback, one of the FCS Players of the Year. Not exactly official award, but he was one of the best quarterbacks in the FCS, passing yards leader, Max Brosmer from New Hampshire. Then you've got the former Michigan quarterback in Cade McNamara. And then it just continues. You got Michigan's quarterback, who is supposed to be the starter, Alex Orji. So look at Athan Kalimanakis, if I'm even saying that correctly, the former Minnesota starting quarterback transferred to Rutgers. So you see UCLA on this list, they have there's four quarterbacks in the Big Ten rated lower than Ethan Garbers. And there's one or two that I think in the Big Ten should not be rated higher than Garbers. That's what UCLA is getting, an underrated, understated quarterback who is a veteran, and he's not going to necessarily be the top 10 pick, number one pick, or second round pick or something like that this year. He wasn't even named to a Senior Bowl watch list like the other 10 Bruins were on this team. So you got a guy who can do what's needed, and hopefully with the mental makeup, with all the adversity he's faced, changing schools, new coach, new system, battling between 1, 2, 3 quarterbacks last year, technically still battling Justin Martin and a whole slew of youth this year in this year's quote-unquote quarterback battle, which really wasn't anything. But he's got rapport with the talented receivers. He's worked with the running backs, knows what this offensive line has. If there was a quarterback to sit behind a new West Coast scheme, I think Garbers is the right guy. He maybe wasn't necessarily a fit under the Chip Kelly system, which you would rather have a dual threat quarterback. Garbers, as much as he can have some speed, he's not that dual threat type of guy. He's not exactly immobile, but I think a West Coast offense is going to suit him a lot better when you've got very talented backs, an extremely talented receiver room, who I think should play himself up, hopefully. If Max Garbers' skill this year, I think it would be reasonable to say he could reach in the 30s for one of the better quarterbacks, and arguably one of the better quarterbacks on the West Coast, right? You're thinking there's Dylan Gabriel. Okay, he's going to be one of the top. He's been around the block. He's been super good. Will Rogers at Washington, new school, new hype. Then you've got the likes of Miller Moss at USC. He did light up a bowl game, supposed to be skilled, went to Bishop Alameda. I remember seeing him in high school perform. He's got some skill. I just wonder, I think it wouldn't be a stretch to say if Garbers plays to his ceiling, it could be one of the better quarterbacks in the West Coast from the power schools. at least number 2 under Gabriel, could be one of the top 30 best quarterbacks, right? Just like how UCLA is trying to become a top 30 recruiting class for the class of 25. If Garbers plays like a top 30 quarterback with the talent that he has, then UCLA is going to make a bowl game. If he plays 50th, then you can see he's expected to be better than 4 team separate quarterbacks on this list that they played this year. Which is funny how, all right, we talk about the defenses, what's Garbers expected, okay? If the defenses aren't up to snuff in the Big Ten and UCLA's got a quarterback that's better than most of these teams on this list, most of the teams on their schedule are replacing a quarterback or a coach. UCLA, yes, replacing coaches, but the offense isn't completely changed. And Garbers was solidified as the starter, got a lot of energy when he came in that LA Bowl to lead them into a victory over Boise State. So in our hearts, he's much higher. In our minds, we know what he has. And he, when he's on the field, just brings a different presence to UCLA as he did at the end of 23, which means UCLA will be competitive and should field a fairly solid offensive potential. Okay, that's what we're looking at in 24. We're going to eat, it's going to be a buffet from Logan Loya. The amount of plays, the amount of different schemes, formations UCLA can run, it's all going to have to run between the genius that Bieniemy is, the solid play needed by the O-line, and the brains and the decision-making of Garbers to help lead UCLA to victory in a bowl game this year. I think he's better than 51st in the country, but he's got to prove it. And even then, if he does play like that, he's still better than the quarterbacks, half the quarterbacks possibly UCLA is going to face in this season alone in the Big Ten. And that's why there's reason for optimism in 24. Keep them upright, keep them healthy, and UCLA can and should surprise with how well they can play, especially offensively. It doesn't mean it's always going to translate to wins, but they will be competitive, which is what UCLA needs to grow that class of 25 and 26 and so on. To wrap up this episode, we're talking Big Ten news. You don't even know the Big Ten nonsense because, hey, when have we had to watch the Big Ten channel? When have we had to watch Big Ten Network, Big Ten Plus, not care about Ohio State other than the fact that UCLA's coach went to be an offensive coordinator there? Who would have cared? Well, now you should. And some of their quotes are interesting and may affect how UCLA does things going forward for their own athletics and what other teams are doing this year for their team. We'll talk about that next. Hey, what's up, guys, ladies and gents? It's Locked On UCLA fans. I want to take a moment and give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. An amazing game and simulation that you can step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Imagine actually being the head coach of the UCLA Bruins, being in DeShaun Foster's shoes, recruiting players, hiring coaching staff, overseeing training camps, scholarships, everything. You control every crucial detail of your program, and it's all in your hands. Can you handle the pressure? Will you? Well, that's what I really love about the game. You're responsible for calling the offensive plays. Your strategy will not only determine success, but shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football Head Coach, completely free, no ads, and 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. So check it out. Make sure to use the special code Locked On UCLA fans, Locked On College Football, Locked On CFB, all caps. And to download the game, visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. Cruising on to the final segment of Locked On UCLA, what we're doing today is around the Big Ten. Let's talk some news, right? You're going to see a lot of Big Ten teams checking in on UCLA, trying to figure out what's this weird West Coast team trying to crash the party they don't expect. All right, we're getting out of that nonsense. We're diving in and seeing what this means for the rest of the Big Ten teams, all right? First, I think let's get off the bat. Dylan Raiola named the starting quarterback in Nebraska. It was all pretty much set in stone, but a true freshman, what does that mean for UCLA? The Bruins traveled to Nebraska, one of the best fan bases in the country, one of the toughest places to play. And yes, UCLA got a win there in the Jim Mora era, back in the early 2010s. Now they're going with a fan base that sells out every game. It's early winter, so it'll be brutally cold. All the jokes and all the things about a West Coast warm weather school, that's what they're going to find out. Nebraska is hyped up after a lot of close games under Matt Rule, a defense that was one of the better in the Big Ten when it came to total defense. One-score games were not their friend, but they had better quarterback play. They're expecting a dream season and a shot at a college football playoff berth to make the 12-team inaugural 12-team bracket. That is where Nebraska is trying to figure things out this year for this Husker ball club. Now, Bruins go over there, and we're not really sure what that record will be. A lot of it, projection-wise, most likely not the best. However, I think UCLA, whenever there's a true freshman quarterback in the game, there's an opportunity. But in November, by that point, Raiola will have quite a few games, quite a few reps under his belt, whether it's confidence or, as UCLA saw last year, you can certainly lose that confidence in a true freshman year. Even Dante Moore expected a redshirt this year, former Bruin quarterback, now turned Oregon Duck, as he sits a year under Dylan Gabriel. Okay, so now UCLA is waiting to see a true freshman quarterback on their schedule late in the year, where hopefully the defense has things, and Kaiken Malloy can help disguise things with a veteran secondary that hopes to be a ball hawk against a freshman quarterback. Like many teams in the Big Ten, UCLA faces this year, new coach, new quarterback. That is what gives me optimism, hopefully, in that some of these games the Bruins play, regardless of the question marks on defense, other teams may have questions on quarterback. And that's a little more turnover in the college game, but that's something to look out for. Now, something defensively for one of their opponents, you're looking at Rutgers. UCLA goes to play Rutgers, I think in mid-October off the top of my brain or something like that. It hasn't been fully ingrained in my brain just yet, but they do play Rutgers on the road. A team under Greg Schiano where the Scarlet Knights have been growing, having more potential. He's returned to Rutgers. Unfortunately, one of the sadder news is that Mohamed Toure tore his ACL. He was their leading star linebacker, and when he's been healthy, he has led the Scarlet Knights in sacks 3 of the last 4 years, was a semifinalist for Comeback Player of the Year, tore his ACL in 2022 in the spring, was honorable mention on all Big Ten teams and preseason selections. What Greg Schiano, the Rutgers coach, said, it's sad. He put so much work into getting ready for the year. It's the game of football. Unfortunately, these things happen. We'll help him get through rehab, and we'll get him back and help him reach his goals and potential. A guy who in his 6th year had NFL aspirations when healthy. What is his numbers? The captain, 4.5 sacks, 9.5 tackles for loss last year, a pick, and a forced fumble. And he was one of the 7 best linebackers in the Big Ten. Mind you, that's the Michigan. There's a bunch of good guys. He was the leader for a team that won the Pinstripe Bowl against Miami last year. Rutgers started 6-2. They took Minnesota's starting quarterback. They wanted those overall defensive schematics to bring with the new starting quarterback. The Big Ten's leading rusher goes to Rutgers as well, but one of their starting linebackers out for the year, and that's something for a UCLA team that's going to be led offensively. If one of their opponents is losing a guy like Toure, that's just unfortunate, but that just means it's a big hole. And Rutgers also, Tyreen Powell, another expected starting linebacker for Rutgers, is still recovering from an Achilles injury and may not be ready to start their opener against Howard. That's something to take an eye on, take a look at the depth at teams at some point in the Big Ten. And that's an inward question to UCLA. The depth is just not there this year because of what was left over by Chip Kelly. DeShaun Foster has done his best to fill the holes. They tried to make sure guys didn't leave, and the guys who did leave might have had opportunities to play. In the end, UCLA, they have talent, okay? They have talent on this team. It's just not at every position. 3 spots all the way down the depth chart, baked in with All-Americans who can fill in for All-Americans who can fill in for an All-American. So you look at Rutgers. That was going to be a tough game to play at Rutgers, all right, in New Jersey. Going to be very tough. And now you're seeing someone in a position of strength gone, one of their other guys, starting linebackers, gone, and Powell will hurt for now, not gone. And you hope that Rutgers, Toure, we hope he gets healthy. You never want to see that, a guy who had some pro aspirations. And I wonder if he gets a 7th year, if he just decides to go pro and has to work as an undrafted free agent to get into the NFL ranks and surprise later, if he's healthy enough. But he was an initial edge rusher, got a 6th year, and he's been playing off the edge, and he was pretty dominant in the Big Ten, which is a lot to say as a Big Ten defense that was top 35 in a lot of defensive categories across the country. Pass defense, yards per pass, with a returning Big Ten leader in rusher and a Minnesota transfer to shore up quarterback. All right, that is something to look out for as UCLA goes to play true freshman quarterback defense. On offense, they get to play a team that may have some holes at linebacker, so some of their depth spots. It might not be when they get there. Another thing, now moving on to the Ohio State side of things, there's a quote about what they are trying to do in this new day and age where they might start treating some of their Olympic sports. It might cost scholarships. And I believe this was posted in the Columbus Dispatch. They're talking up with a higher up. I forget off the top of my head about Ohio State, but it was in the Columbus Dispatch about how they might start treating some of the extra scholarships. Because not just football, not just men's basketball, every sport across the country basically saw an increase in scholarship opportunities. And now you got to pay for players. They got to back pay players up to maybe millions and millions of dollars in football and men's basketball. That's a lot to deal with, even for a self-sustaining, I think as the article quoted, Ohio State, self-sustaining athletic department, right? And I think what was it? Mick Cronin or Chip? One of these guys said, Mick Cronin said this, only a few athletic departments actually make money, right? UCLA is not one of those athletic departments that make money. Of the short list of 4 to 5 teams that can make money based off football or men's basketball, or some schools can do both, the rare opportunity. In UCLA, if they can make the Big Ten money work, can potentially do that. Ohio State, what they might do, start treating their other sports where UCLA has many national championships, right? When it comes to a gymnastics, a water polo, all these different things, UCLA has won championships. The motto was champions made here. And we just had the Olympics. The 2028 Olympics are coming to LA. All right? So many former Olympians have come or competed at or with UCLA. So it's looking like Ohio State, are they going to back off, have teams just go play with limited support? Does that mean UCLA can go pick up on some of these sports if they can continue to support fully and fund all these other teams and championships? That's what UCLA has to do because they have so much rich history, anywhere from men's volleyball to women's volleyball national champions, the water polo ranks where they're undefeated in one, competing for a championship in the other, beach volleyball, which I think the championships are being held in Huntington Beach, I think in 25. Got to quote me on that. So UCLA, that's the difference, right? Ohio State's going to maybe sit down and keep their budget and go after football, men's basketball, other sports they see fit, and not sprinkle it down. What UCLA is going to do in all these sports, they got to spread the wealth because they got to go, one, first give $10 million to Cal. 2, make sure the budget works enough for football to give enough money to keep players coming. Then basketball to keep them happy. Corey Close is getting 5 stars. In order to keep those 5 stars coming on the women's side of things, got to make sure you got enough money in NIL to keep that coming, or they're going to go to South Carolina. They're going to go to Geno. They might even go to crosstown to Lindsey Gottlieb, who got Juju Watkins and completely revitalized their program. And then you look at the other sports. Stanford, a few years ago, was doing their best to cut sports. And now there was so much outrage that they didn't do so. Right? They saved some of those sports. So the question remains, not sure what the answer is. If not, the answer is what we are in now, be in the Big Ten and make a lot of money. What happens when the money has already come in? Can they sustain it? Will the Rose Bowl expected increase in attendance, a lot from road fans, and hopefully some hype from DeShaun Foster? The TV money, hopefully some football hype at a bowl win, some basketball deep runs into March Madness for both the men and the women, because the women's are getting a lot more revenue as well. And the men, if they go deep in the tournament, you add all that together, then maybe UCLA can continue to compete like they should in all these sports, from the MPSF to the Big Ten into the rest of the big money sports. It's a unique thing that Martin Germain has to deal with, that the UCLA athletics, UCLA as a whole, is looking where other schools might pull and pinch and make sure they can keep enough. UCLA can go dominate those other sports, but it will come at a cost and at a price to maybe win a championship, or at the cost of how are they going to spread the wealth between every recruit, every player that comes and tries to apply to the most applied to public university in the country. We'll find out. Just like you should find out, watch some more Locked On UCLA content, download, subscribe, review. Go check out a second listen, Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. And hey, continue to watch Locked On UCLA. Get your hands up, Bruins fans. It's an 8-clap time, baby. We're excited for the future. Big Ten, the season starts soon. Let's get ready to rock and roll. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA. Fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.